What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, Pete's Carport, and welcome to another video featuring my 1991 BMW 318i. This is an E30 body style, which is my absolute favorite body style of any BMW, and this happens to be the four-door version, which I prefer. There's just something about a family car tearing up the streets, and this one happens to be fully set up for drifting. We've done the roll cage, I put the custom plaid interior in there. It does have STI seats, and a lot of the interior has been gutted by the prior owner. I'm going to put some of it back together, like we added the really lightweight carpet, so go check out some of those videos. On today's agenda, though, is fixing, or technically we're replacing the fuel injectors with better fuel injectors, but I've already went ahead and did it. I didn't record it because they ended up being the wrong injectors. So today we're going to fix the issue that we have and hopefully be able to resolve for you guys how to do this. And these are going to be the 4-hole Bosch style injectors that should be a direct replacement. Unfortunately, I ordered some used ones. The guy sent me out the plugs, and I ended up swapping out to these plugs, and none of this worked. We had a lot of fuel leaking. I'll explain that as we go through it. Now, the good news is during the installation of the wrong injectors, I was able to paint the intake manifold as well as the valve cover. So those came out really good. Not going to show those on film, but we did that. I did them in a wrinkle red and a wrinkle black, and I like the way they came out. We're going to have to pull our intake manifold off again to get to the injectors. And let me explain to you what happened. So I ordered in some used injectors off somebody who claimed they had these on a BMW, and they pulled them from a Ford, not sure exactly which car. But they sent out the plugs, and the plugs were different than the ones on the stock car, and I had heard that they were a direct swap, like you didn't have to change anything. But I went ahead and wired in the new plugs, set everything up. So the main issue I had with the injectors I first ordered in was the slot for the clip that holds the injectors in is too low. So there's only one slot, and if you look at these injectors I just ordered in, you'll see there's two little slots. The upper slot is the one that we're going to be using on this style E30. I'm guessing this slot here is just for different cars. So what happened was these ended up blowing off, leaking everywhere, and I ended up modifying them to fit properly, but they still just aren't sealing right, and I'm getting a lot of misfire. So we're going to remove these completely, and unfortunately now I've got to put in the new plugs again. I didn't save the ones that were originally on this car. I clipped everything off, tossed it away. I know that was absolutely dumb because I could have just put the original ones back in and been on my way, but now we're gonna have new upgraded injectors. These are the 4-hole Bosch, which give you better atomization, so you're gonna get better fuel consumption, you're gonna get just better fuel burning and better throttle response from these. And I'm pretty excited about what this is gonna do for the car. So we're gonna swap them all out. I think the original plugs might have just been able to snap right into these. So these injectors I ordered off eBay, and they're for a Jeep Cherokee. I want to say 89 to 95-ish, but I'll put the link in the description. They were pretty inexpensive. I want to say like 40 bucks for 6 of them. We're only going to need 4 for our 318i because it's a 4-cylinder. So let's get started. I'll pull everything off. I'll show you guys exactly the steps that I did to install the old injectors and how we're going to install the new injectors, and I'll give you guys an update of how well they run. So let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is take off our intake manifold. There's going to be 11mm nuts going all around here. They're very easy to access, and so we're going to go ahead and take all those off. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I believe, maybe 8. I'm going to go ahead and pull them all off. That's going to allow us to pull up our intake manifold. Underneath that is going to be a gasket. So this is the upper section. There is a lower section to this intake manifold. We are also going to need to remove our airbox hose here, and there's a couple other lines that you can remove, but we're not going to. We're just going to pull this off and kind of lay it forward, and I'll show you guys that exactly. But let me go ahead and get all of these nuts off here. Like I said, 11mm all the way around, and we'll go ahead and pull up the intake manifold once we get our boot off. Okay, so you can see here, this is our fuel rail, and our injectors are mounted up underneath there, pressed into this fuel rail, and our plugs the wiring goes through this here and plugs into each injector. There's two 10mm bolts that hold our fuel rail on, but we want to make sure we release the pressure that's inside of there prior to trying to remove that. So what you can do is pull your fuel pump fuse and crank the car. This way the fuel will actually go through the system, but there'll be no more pumping through, and that should be good enough to remove this. But of course, always take safety precautions and make sure you relieve the pressure before pulling that off. I've already went ahead and did that, so I'm going to go ahead and grab a 10mm, pull this off, and we'll be able to access our fuel injectors, and we'll go from there. Alright, so here are our fuel injectors. They are plugged in from the top here, and then if you look right here, there's a little clip that holds them in, and I can feel that this has been leaking because there's fuel all around it. And like I was saying earlier, these were not the right injectors. Make sure you do not lose those clips. I can see where it fell, but you'll see here I had to modify this by cutting this little slit, and it's just not right in the right area. Oh, we're leaking some fuel there. But we're going to use those new injectors, which have the exact little slot that we need for this to properly seat in there. Let's go ahead and change each one of these out, and then we're going to have to open up this casing and wire in our new plugs. Like I said, I wired in these plugs. I tossed out the stock ones. I really wish I would have kept them, because then I'd be able to let you guys know if those injectors are a direct plug. But I went ahead and ordered in new plugs for those injectors. They weren't that expensive, and we're going to wire those ones in so that we can plug them into the new injectors. Let's go ahead and get set up. I'll do all of that. Alright guys, so I went ahead and got it all soldered up. I wrapped it with electrical tape. Normally you want to do heat shrink, but I ran out. Electrical tape should be fine. And then I bundled everything up, snapped our cover back on, and you can see our plugs are hanging out in order, so you won't mess them up. Now, before installing the injectors, I want to go ahead and test them. Even though they're brand new, the worst thing would be if we got all this put back together and one of the injectors was failing, because we do have 6. So if we have a bad one, we can always grab another one. Hopefully that'll be good. So I'm going to show you guys how you can test it with a 9-volt battery before installing. Alright, so in order to test our new injectors, what you want to do is get some alligator clips. I've got a red and a black one, and you want to hook one to each one of the prongs on the inside. Like I said earlier, it does not matter which one's positive or negative. As long as you've got a ground and a positive, it will activate the injector. So you've got that hooked up. Then we do the other end to a 9-volt battery. So you can see I got the black hooked up, and if I tap the red, you're going to hear a click. That means your injectors are good, they're activating. Now, if they're older injectors, they still could be clogged, but at least that's going to tell you that the electrical side of it is working. So let's go ahead and install this one and test each one and install the rest. So I'm going to start down here on this end to show you guys how this works. So you want to remove this little metal clip here that's going to lock in our fuel injectors into our plug. So you just want to pull that out. You might need a screwdriver or some pliers to get that loose. And then we're going to be able to plug in our injector properly. Just make sure you line it up right. There's only one way. It will slide right in, and then we're going to install our clip right over that, like so. And that will lock our plug in so it doesn't come loose. That is one thing that I was missing from the other plugs, is there was no locking mechanism, and I was wondering if they were just bouncing loose and not working because of the misfire. So before installing the injector, I'm going to go ahead and throw a little bit of Marvel Mystery Oil on our rubber seal right here. That's just going to allow it to sit in, go in a little bit easier and seat a little bit better. You can use regular oil, lithium grease some people use. It's best to use something so that it slides in a little bit easier. So let's go ahead and do that and get this in. Now once you got the injector up in the fuel rail, you want to grab your clip, and you're going to slide that clip through this top little cutout ridge and up and over the metal part, and you'll hear it click usually, and you'll see here how it's sitting. This little clip here, the little groove in it, is going to sit on the fuel rail. And just make sure it's seated properly on both sides. And then once we get all of them put into the top area here, we'll be able to press them down into our injector hole and screw everything down. I'll show you guys how that goes. Let me get the rest of these on. Alright guys, so I decided to go down and get new clips here because I didn't feel like the ones that I had were holding on tight enough. It was $4.99 for like a thing of 10 of them. I'll leave a link to that. It's the same brand as these plugs that I picked up, and I was able to pick them up same day at Advance Auto. So now that you've got your injectors all installed, I've already went ahead and installed all my plugs. You're going to slide your fuel rail into place. Just line up the little studs. And now what you got to do is make sure your injectors are lined up down below with the holes. You don't want to go pressing on them if one of them is not lined up properly. So once you've got those in place, just go to each one of them, make sure it's sliding into the hole. You can then press down and you'll feel it press in. And then you want to go ahead and grab your 10mm nuts that we took off on each one of these posts here and tighten those down. I don't have a torque spec for it, but I just tightened them pretty snug, and that'll press down on your injectors. As long as it's on there snug, injectors won't be able to pull up, and that's the main thing you want to avoid. So your wire holder is going to sit right here, and our intake is going to slide back on. Make sure all your hoses are connected. If you disconnected them, nothing gets in the way of here. I'll show you guys that as I put it back on, and then we'll be able to tighten all that down and test the car out. So to install our intake, you just want to make sure you line up these two posts first. Get those slid on there. This is a vacuum line right here that goes to the fuel rail. You want to make sure that is not in the way of where the gasket is. And then you'll be able to wiggle this down. Might have to move a couple things. Just make sure everything looks good. And this is pressing down on it tight. And like I said, we changed our gasket out. It's the upper intake manifold gasket. I'll try to leave a link to that. I changed that gasket out. I got it locally. I think I got that one over at AutoZone, and I was able to pick it up that day. So now that we've got our intake manifold lined up, I'm going to go ahead and put all of our nuts back on. Torque those down. I'll put the torque spec on the screen. Now, make sure you tighten them in like a cross pattern so you don't over tighten one side and not the other. I'm going to start in one corner, go to the next corner, and then go down and then back up and kind of go zigzag like that. And then I'm going to tighten them up to the torque spec after I hand tighten them up. And that should be about it. We'll be able to put our intake back on, start our car up, and test these injectors out and make sure they are working. Alright guys, so I went ahead and changed out the fuel injectors, started it up. It's idling real nice. Just took it around the block for a quick spin. Now I can rev it, stays started. Before it was stalling right out. I cleaned out my map as well and changed the spark plugs. Once again guys, my name's Pete. This is Pete's Carport. You guys have an awesome day, a blessed week, and I'll catch you on the next video.